HOA Karen's daughter took my ATV, told me I couldn't stop her, and for a moment I actually thought she was right. She laughed in my face, bragging she was untouchable. The whole neighborhood watched, silent, afraid of Karen's power. But then the cops showed up, and what happened next changed everything, because the one person who thought she was untouchable was about to be dragged away in handcuffs. And the reason why will shock you. Welcome back to HOA Secrets Uncovered, where we dive into the drama, the lies, and the secrets hiding behind perfect suburban fences. My name's Daniel. I'm a homeowner in a quiet cul-de-sac. I work a regular job, keep my lawn neat, pay my dues like everyone else. But somehow, I always end up standing toe-to-toe with the HOA's darkest side. And this story is one of the wildest yet. HOA Karen's daughter took my ATV, told me I couldn't stop her, and then laughed like it was a game. When the cops arrived, her smile finally cracked. But before we reach that moment, let me take you back to where it all started. My name's Daniel. I live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where every house looks perfect, every lawn is green, and every smile hides something sharp underneath. I moved here because I thought it would be peaceful, safe, a place where people minded their own business. But I didn't know about the HOA, or Karen. Karen wasn't just another neighbor. She was the queen of the block, the HOA president, always walking around with a clipboard, always ready to point out if your grass was an inch too high, or if your garbage bins were left out for too long. She didn't just enforce rules, she enjoyed it. And her daughter, she was the same, only worse. That day started normal. The sun was bright. Kids were riding bikes, sprinklers spraying across driveways. I was in my garage, checking my ATV, tightening the bolts, planning to ride later in the evening. Then I heard the sound. Footsteps, whispers, and then the roar of my engine. I turned, and there she was, Karen's daughter, sitting on my ATV like it was her throne. She revved it up, looked right at me, and smiled. I shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? That's mine." But she just laughed. She said, "You can't stop me. I'm untouchable." And before I could move, she drove off, speeding down the street, dust rising behind her. I ran after her, but she was gone. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Some stood on porches pretending not to watch. Nobody said a word, because everyone knew, you don't mess with Karen's family. She had the HOA in her pocket. She had power, and people were scared of her. But I wasn't scared. I was angry. I stormed up to her house, my heart racing. I banged on the door until it swung open. And there she was, Karen, standing tall with that fake smile she always wore. Her daughter was behind her, smirking like she had just won a prize. I said, "Your daughter stole my ATV. I want it back now." Karen didn't even blink. She said, "She didn't steal it. She just borrowed it. Maybe you should be more generous." Then she leaned closer, lowered her voice, and said, "If you keep pushing, the HOA will fine you instead." Her daughter laughed, right there in my face. And I swear in that moment, my blood boiled. I wanted to drag my ATV back with my own hands. But I knew if I tried, Karen would twist it, turn the neighborhood against me, slap me with fines until I broke. So I walked away, fists clenched, my mind spinning with anger and disbelief. That night, and I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out at the street, waiting, hoping she'd ride back on my ATV so I could catch her. But the street stayed quiet. The only sound was the crickets, and my thoughts getting darker. Why was everyone afraid of her? Why did nobody stand up? And why did I feel like I was the only one willing to fight? The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found a letter, a violation notice. It said my ATV was improperly stored, that it was an eyesore, and that I had to pay a fine. I laughed out loud, the kind of bitter laugh you let out when something is so unfair it almost feels like a joke, because the ATV wasn't even in my garage anymore. Her daughter had it, but Karen had written me up anyway. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my ATV. This was about control. Karen wanted to show me, and the whole neighborhood, that she could take anything she wanted, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. But she was wrong, because I wasn't going to play her little HOA games. I was going to fight back. I started small, asking neighbors if they'd seen her daughter on the ATV. Some nodded, quietly, afraid to speak too loud. One old man whispered, "She drives it around at night like she owns the whole street." Another neighbor shook his head and said, "Be careful. Nobody ever wins against Karen, but I wasn't looking to win a popularity contest. I just wanted my ATV back and justice." So I pulled out my phone, started recording everything. I filmed the empty space in my garage. I filmed Karen's daughter speeding by when she thought no one was watching. I filmed the laughter, the arrogance, the way she flaunted it like a trophy. And the more I recorded, the more I realized this wasn't just my fight. This was every neighbor's fight. They just didn't know it yet. Days passed, and the tension grew. Karen's daughter drove by, slower each time, revving the engine, taunting me, like she wanted me to explode. But I stayed calm, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't taking this to the HOA. I was taking this to the police. And when I finally did, the look on her face was worth every second of waiting. But before I tell you what happened when the cops arrived, let me ask you this. If your neighbor's kid stole something of yours, and their parent threatened to fine you if you spoke up, what would you do? Would you stay silent to avoid the drama? Or would you fight back, no matter how ugly it got? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know. How far would you go against someone who thinks they're untouchable? The morning after I reported everything to the police, I stood in my driveway staring at the street. The houses looked calm, the sprinklers ticking in rhythm, the smell of fresh-cut grass floating in the air. But I knew better. Behind those windows, people were watching, whispering, waiting to see what I would do next. Living in this neighborhood always looked perfect on the outside. The mailboxes were lined up like soldiers, the fences painted bright white, the lawns all trimmed to the same height. But the truth was, it wasn't just about neat lawns. It was about control. The HOA wasn't here to keep peace. It was here to keep power in the hands of people like Karen. And Karen, she loved it. She loved writing people up, loved showing everyone she was in charge. If you planted the wrong flowers, she fined you. If your Christmas lights stayed up one day too long, she fined you. And if you dared question her, she would drown you in violation letters until you gave up. That was the game she played. But now she wasn't just writing me up. She had let her daughter take something from me and dared me to do something about it. I couldn't get her words out of my head. If you keep pushing, the HOA will fine you instead. It echoed like poison. She really thought she was untouchable. And maybe she would have been, if I hadn't decided to turn every piece of her arrogance into evidence. The first night after reporting, I sat by my window again, my camera ready. The street was quiet at first, only the buzzing of the street lamp and the sound of leaves moving in the wind. Then I heard it, the engine, the familiar roar of my ATV, and there she was, Karen's daughter, racing down the cul-de-sac with her hair flying back, laughing into the night. I hit record, following her with the lens as she circled the block like it was her personal racetrack. She wasn't afraid of being caught, because she thought nobody would ever call her out. But this time, she was wrong. By the third night, I had hours of footage, her face clear, her hands on the handlebars, her laughter echoing into the quiet streets. Every time she sped past my house, I zoomed in tighter, catching every smirk, every mocking glance she threw my way. I didn't just have proof she stole it, I had proof she was flaunting it. But something strange started happening. Neighbors began noticing me sitting out front, watching, recording. Some of them gave me nervous looks. Others whispered when they walked their dogs. And then one night, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Be careful. You don't know what she's capable of." I looked outside, but the street was empty. No one in sight, just shadows behind curtains. And it hit me. The neighborhood was divided. Some wanted me to fight. Some wanted me to stop, but nobody was brave enough to say it out loud. The following morning, I was leaving for work when I saw Karen at the end of the driveway, clipboard in hand, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. She said, "Morning, Daniel. Still upset about your little toy?" I froze, gripping my keys tighter. She leaned closer and added, "You should really learn to let things go. It would make your life easier." Then she turned, walked away. Her daughter sitting on the porch steps, blowing a bubble of gum that popped like a gunshot in the silence. They were daring me to quit. They wanted me to give up. But that warning text, the whispers, the fear in my neighbor's eyes, it only pushed me harder, because if I gave up, I'd be just like them, silent prisoners in Karen's perfect little kingdom. That night, I didn't wait for her daughter to ride by. I drove around, slowly, carefully. And there she was, parked by the gas station 2 blocks over, sitting on my ATV with a group of friends, laughing, bragging. I parked far enough away not to be seen, lifted my phone, and started filming again. Her friends pointed at the ATV, clapping. Some even cheered when she revved the engine. And then I heard her say it, loud and clear. "It's mine now. Nobody can take it back. Not even the cops." I smiled to myself, because little did she know, the cops were about to see everything. I drove home, my heart pounding. And for the first time since it all began, I felt a little calmer, because now I wasn't just fighting a spoiled kid and her power-drunk mother. I had the truth, and the truth was heavy enough to break their lies. But even as I sat there, reviewing the videos, saving the files, I couldn't shake one thought from my head. What if Karen tried to twist it all against me? Again. What if she convinced the HOA that I was harassing them, stalking them? What if she turned the neighborhood against me before I even got my ATV back? The paranoia crept in like smoke, filling every corner of my mind. And yet, beneath it all, there was a fire telling me I was doing the right thing. That even if they hated me, even if they tried to bury me in fines, I wasn't letting this go. Because if Karen could take from me, she could take from anyone. And I wasn't about to let her daughter become the untouchable queen of our streets. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen lighting my face. The videos played again and again, proof of her arrogance, proof of her theft, proof of everything she thought she could hide behind the HOA's power. Soon, she wouldn't be laughing anymore. But I wondered, as I stared into the night, who else in this neighborhood had stories like mine? Who else had been bullied into silence, fined into obedience, mocked into submission? And if I brought Karen and her daughter down, would they finally find their voices too? And that's when the real question hit me. If you lived in a neighborhood where one family thought they owned the streets, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you risk everything to show the truth? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know. Would you fight for justice even if it meant standing alone against everyone else? That morning felt different. The air was heavy, the street too quiet, almost like the neighborhood was holding its breath. I walked out to grab the mail, but before I even reached the box, I saw her, Karen, standing across the street with two board members from the HOA. They weren't talking. They were watching, whispering, scribbling on papers, and I knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't inspecting the neighborhood. They were inspecting me. I clenched my fists because deep down, I knew the truth. Karen must have realized I went to the police. She could smell it, sense it, like a predator circling prey. And now, she was trying to crush me before the truth came out. I walked back inside, my chest tight, my phone buzzing with nervous energy. I opened it, checked the videos again. Her daughter riding my ATV, laughing, bragging, telling her friends it was hers. It was all there, clear as day, undeniable. But Karen wasn't stupid. She knew her daughter's arrogance had gone too far. She knew I had proof, and that meant one thing. She was going to fight dirtier than ever. That afternoon, I came home from work, and there it was waiting for me. Another violation letter, thicker than usual, stuffed into my mailbox like a threat. I tore it open, and my stomach turned. Not one violation, not two, 5 separate violations. For weeds in the yard, for trash bins out of sight by 2 inches, for parking too close to the sidewalk, for unapproved equipment in the garage, and the final one, for harassment of HOA members. Harassment. She actually wrote me up for harassment, for confronting her about the theft of my own ATV. I sat down on the curb with the letter in my hands, neighbors walking by pretending not to notice. I could see it in their eyes, though, the pity, the fear. They knew Karen was trying to bury me alive in paperwork, and yet none of them would stand beside me. I wanted to scream, wanted to march to her house and demand she stop. But I knew that was what she wanted. She wanted me to lose my temper, to make a mistake, so she could point at me and say, "See? He's the problem." So I stayed quiet, for the moment. I folded the letter, slid it into a folder where I had been keeping every piece of evidence. Because if Karen wanted a war, I was going to fight it my way. That night, I couldn't rest. I kept hearing her daughter's laugh in my head, the roar of the ATV, the sound of those violation letters crumpling in my fist, and something inside me snapped. I grabbed my keys and drove, not far, just around the block, searching, and there she was again, at the park, sitting on my ATV like it was a throne. Her friends crowded around her like loyal subjects. They were recording her on their phones, cheering, shouting, and she shouted back, "This is mine now. Nobody can stop me, not even the cops." That was it. I parked across the street, pulled out my own phone, and filmed everything. The laughter, the cheers, the arrogance spilling out of her mouth. It was no longer just theft. It was a confession. When she finally sped away, I followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. She turned down a back road, past the houses, heading straight for her own driveway. And for a moment, I thought about pulling in behind her, dragging the ATV back right then and there. But I stopped myself, because this wasn't just about getting it back anymore. This was about proving she wasn't untouchable. The next morning, I called the officer I had spotted Ken to before. I sent him everything, the videos, the timestamps, the proof she had confessed. He said he'd review it, and I felt my chest finally loosen a little. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. For the first time, I had backup. But Karen must have felt the shift, because that same day, she came storming into my yard, her sunglasses off, her eyes sharp like knives. She said, "You think the police care about you? About your little toy?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "They listen to me, not you." Her daughter stood behind her, grinning, chewing gum. I didn't answer. I just lifted my phone, the screen glowing, recording every word, every threat. Karen froze for a second, then smiled again, a colder smile than ever. "You'll regret this, Daniel," she whispered, before walking back to her house. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline, because the more she threatened me, the more she revealed her weakness. She was scared, scared that for once, the truth might actually crush her perfect empire. That night, I sat outside again, listening to the silence of the cul-de-sac. But it didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like a storm, building, ready to break. And in that storm, there were only two sides. Her side and mine. I leaned back, staring up at the stars. And I asked myself, how far was I willing to go? How much was I willing to risk? Because this wasn't just about an ATV anymore. This was about freedom, about respect, about finally standing up to the person who thought she owned us all. And maybe, just maybe, if I fought hard enough, the others would stop hiding behind their curtains and start fighting too. But that brings me to the question I can't get out of my head. If you were standing in my shoes and the most powerful person in your neighborhood threatened you face to face, would you back down to keep the peace? Or would you record everything and fight to bring them down? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know. How far would you go when someone with power dares you to stay silent? The next few days felt like walking through enemy territory. Every step outside my house, every glance from a neighbor, felt heavier than usual. It was like everyone knew the war between me and Karen had begun, but nobody dared to say a word. I started noticing things, little things. A trash can knocked over in my yard, a scratch across my mailbox, footprints in the dirt near my fence. Was it random, or was it Karen's daughter trying to send me a message? I couldn't tell, but I knew one thing. I was being watched. That morning, I left for work, and as I backed out of the driveway, I saw Karen's daughter sitting on the ATV at the corner of the street. She wasn't riding it. She was waiting. Her chin tilted up, her eyes locked on me. She smirked, revved the engine, and sped off in the opposite direction. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was a taunt, a game of dominance. By the time I got home that night, another violation letter was waiting in my mailbox. This time it accused me of intimidating behavior. Apparently, standing in my own yard and holding my phone was enough for Karen to claim I was harassing the community. The fine was bigger this time, but the threat behind it was even bigger. I knew exactly what Karen was doing. She wasn't just trying to punish me. She was trying to build a case. She wanted the HOA board to see me as unstable, as a danger. She wanted to twist the story so that if the cops didn't take her daughter's side, the HOA would destroy me financially instead. But she underestimated me. Because while she was writing up lies on her clipboard, I was stacking up truth on mine. Every video I had, every threat she made, every laugh her daughter shouted while riding the ATV. It was all time-stamped, all backed up in multiple places. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was building a wall she couldn't climb over. Still, the pressure was getting to me. Nights felt longer. My mind wouldn't quiet down. And even though I had proof, I couldn't shake the fear that Karen might twist everything before I got the chance to expose her. One evening, as I sat in my garage reviewing footage again, I heard a noise outside. At first I thought it was the wind, but then came the sound, the growl of an engine. I ran to the window, and there she was, Karen's daughter, flying down the street on my ATV. This time with no helmet, no care, just pure arrogance. But what caught my attention wasn't just her. It was the blue lights flashing in the distance, slowly turning onto the street. My heart jumped. The police car rolled closer, its headlights flooding the road. And for the first time, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe justice was finally here. But just as the cruiser reached the corner, she swerved into her driveway, jumped off the ATV, and vanished inside the garage. The door slammed shut, the lights went dark, and when the police car passed by, it looked like nothing had happened at all. I stood frozen, my fists tight. She had escaped again, hiding behind the safety of Karen's walls. And the cops, they hadn't seen a thing. The next day, I drove to the station myself. I showed the officer everything, the videos of her at the park, the joy rides at night, even the one where she bragged about owning it now. The officer leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. He said, "This is good, but we need to catch her in the act. With the ATV in her possession, that's the cleanest case we can make." I nodded, my stomach sinking, because catching her in the act meant waiting again, watching again, putting myself deeper into the storm. That night, I sat outside with my camera ready. The streetlights flickered. Shadows stretched long across the pavement. Every sound felt louder than usual. Every passing car made my heart jump. And then, I heard it. The roar of the engine. Closer, louder, filling the night. She appeared from the corner, flying past my house with her hair whipping in the wind. her laughter echoing like nails on glass. I hit record, zooming in, capturing everything. And this time, I followed her. I drove slowly, headlights off, keeping just enough distance not to be noticed. She turned down side streets, weaving, taunting the world. Finally, she stopped near the park again, her friends waiting like it was some kind of celebration. She spun the ATV in circles, dust rising, lights flashing, and her friends cheered like she was a queen showing off her crown. I filmed it all, my pulse racing, because this wasn't just proof, this was undeniable. And just as I was about to leave, one of her friends shouted something that made my stomach drop. Her mom says he's scared of us, says he'll never win. That was it. I realized then, this wasn't just her daughter's arrogance. This was Karen feeding her the fire, fueling the belief that nothing could touch them. It wasn't just a spoiled teenager on my ATV. It was a power play, orchestrated by the queen of the HOA herself. I drove home shaking, my mind split between rage and focus. Because now, I didn't just want justice. I wanted to shatter the empire Karen had built on fear and silence. I sat in my garage staring at the folder full of evidence. The pictures, the letters, the VE, ideos, the threats. Piece by piece, I was building a case not just against her daughter, but against Karen herself. But the question echoing in my head was this: how much longer could I wait before everything boiled over? Before Karen or her daughter made their next move? Before the neighborhood itself turned against me? I leaned back, staring into the dark, the sound of the ATV still roaring in my ears. And I couldn't stop asking myself, if you were in my place, and the person stealing from you was being protected by power, would you stay patient and wait for justice? Or would you take matters into your own hands and end it yourself? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know, when power shields the guilty, do you play by the rules or break them to get your life back? The days that followed were heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on me. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me, neighbors whispering behind half-closed blinds, their voices soft but sharp. I wasn't just fighting Karen and her daughter anymore. I was fighting the silence of an entire neighborhood. Some of them pitied me. I could see it in their faces when they waved from across the street, hesitant, unsure if being seen talking to me would make them the next target. Others looked at me like I was the problem. Like Karen's story about me being unstable had already taken root. And in the middle of it all, her daughter kept riding that ATV like it was a victory lap. Each roar of that engine echoed like a reminder. We own this street. We own this power. One night, as I walked out to grab my mail, I noticed something new taped to my front door. Another violation notice. But this one wasn't about noise, or harassment, or intimidation. This one accused me of operating dangerous surveillance equipment. Yes, Karen was now trying to find me for having cameras. Cameras I had legally installed to protect my property. I stood there staring at the letter, my hands shaking with rage. She wasn't just bending the rules anymore, she was rewriting them to crush me. But then, a shift happened, the very next evening. As Karen's daughter tore down the street on my ATV, I noticed a police car parked quietly at the far end of the block. No lights on, no siren, just sitting in the shadows, watching. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining it, but then the door cracked open, and an officer stepped out with a flashlight. He didn't move right away. He just watched, studied, like he was waiting for her to make the wrong move. My heart pounded in my chest, because finally, someone other than me was seeing the truth with their own eyes. Karen's daughter must have noticed too, because the second she spotted the cruiser, she slammed the ATV into her driveway, garage door rattling down like a shield between her and reality. And once again, she escaped. But this time felt different. The officer stood there for a while, scribbling into a notepad, then drove slowly past my house. Our eyes met through the window, and he gave me the smallest nod, a nod that said, "We see it now. We're not ignoring it anymore." That single nod gave me more hope than I'd felt in weeks. But it also made Karen more dangerous. The very next morning, I woke up to find a crowd gathered near my driveway, neighbors pointing, whispering, staring at my front yard where someone had spray painted across my fence in bold red letters. Rat. I froze, my throat tightening. It was Karen's daughter. It had to be. She wanted the whole neighborhood to know I was the one going to the cops, the one daring to break the unspoken law of silence around her mother's reign. I could see the smirk on her face from across the street at Bete as she watched me scrub at the paint. And Karen, standing behind her with folded arms, didn't even try to hide her grin. They weren't just mocking me, they were daring me. That evening, I decided enough was enough. I gathered all my footage, every clip, every timestamp, and drove straight back to the police station. The same officer who nodded at me was there, and this time, he took me seriously. He leaned over the counter, lowering his voice. "We're close," he said. "But if you want this to stick, if you want her daughter to face real charges, we need to catch her with the ATV, in plain sight. No garage, no hiding." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. This wasn't about catching her joyriding anymore. It was about pinning undeniable possession, proof she couldn't run from. So I prepared. I adjusted my cameras, synced them to my phone, made sure every angle of the street was covered, and I waited. The next night, the sound came again. That engine, that laugh, that arrogance tearing through the quiet. I rushed to my window, phone in hand, recording every second. And then it happened. She didn't turn into her driveway this time. She drove straight down the block, past the stop sign, weaving recklessly between cars. And as fate would have it, another set of blue lights flared at the corner. This wasn't a stakeout. It was a coincidence. But sometimes, that's all it takes for justice to finally catch up. The police car lit up the street, siren screaming, headlights locking onto her as she froze like a deer in the middle of the road. For the first time, I saw panic on her face. She tried to turn, to bolt into a side yard, but it was too late. The officer blocked her path, stepped out, and shouted words I had been waiting weeks to hear. "Turn off the engine and step away from the vehicle." My camera caught it all. The moment her arrogance cracked, the moment reality sank in, she climbed off slowly, her hands trembling, and for once, she wasn't laughing. The neighborhood fell silent, blinds opening, people peeking out to watch the show. It wasn't just me now. The whole block was seeing the truth unfold in real time. The officer put her in handcuffs, her protests echoing. "You can't do this. My mom runs this neighborhood. You'll lose your job. You'll regret this." But the officer didn't flinch. He read her rights, loaded her into the back of the cruiser, and drove off into the night. I stood there, shaking, overwhelmed. Was this the end of it? Or was it just the beginning of something even bigger? Because as the police car disappeared, I caught sight of Karen, standing on her porch. Her face wasn't shocked. It wasn't scared. It was calm, calculating, like a queen already planning her next move after her pawn had been taken off the board. And that's when the question hit me like a storm. Do you think the arrest of her daughter finally broke Karen's power? Or did it just light the fire for her to come after me harder than ever before? The night her daughter was arrested, I thought the storm was over. But I should have known better. With Karen, the storm doesn't end. It only changes shape. The very next morning, I walked out to grab the paper and froze. There were 3 bright yellow envelopes taped to my front door, violation notices, all issued within hours of each other. The first claimed my lawn was too long. The second accused me of leaving hazardous equipment in plain sight. And the third said my house paint did not match HOA standards. 3 violations, overnight. It was a message, clear as daylight. Her daughter might be gone, but Karen was still in control. As I stood there holding the papers, I could feel her eyes on me. She was standing on her porch, coffee cup in hand, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. That smile wasn't joy. It was war. I knew she was telling me, "Take my daughter away, and I'll take your peace of mind." The neighborhood shifted again. Where once there had been whispers, now there was silence. People avoided eye contact when I passed, their heads turning, blinds snapping shut. Karen had spun her story fast. In less than a day, I had become the problem neighbor, the one who called the cops, the one who brought trouble to the cul-de-sac. Even at the grocery store, I could feel it. Familiar faces turning away. Karen's reach stretched far, further than I imagined. That week, the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Of course, the meeting wasn't about fixing the cracked sidewalks or the broken streetlights. It was about me. At least, that's what the whispers told me. When I walked into the community center, every chair faced me like I was on trial. Karen sat at the front table, gavel in hand. Her eyes locked on me. She spoke with the voice of a queen, calm, commanding, dripping with fake kindness. "Neighbors," she began, "we are gathered here tonight to discuss a member of our community who has disrupted our harmony, who has brought police and chaos to our peaceful streets, who refuses to follow the rules we all live by." Every word cut deeper. She wasn't talking about her daughter. She was talking about me. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, she slammed the gavel down. "You will have your turn, but first, the board will present evidence of your misconduct." One by one, they listed off the violations. He finds the supposed disturbances I had caused. It was absurd. It was twisted. But it was also dangerous, because Karen controlled the narrative. I finally stood up, my voice shaking but firm. "My ATV was stolen, your daughter was arrested, and instead of addressing that, you're punishing me. You're weaponizing this board against anyone who dares to stand up to you." The room buzzed. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably, others stared at the floor. But Karen didn't flinch. She just smiled again, that same cold smile. And then she said, "Maybe the police made a mistake. Maybe the real troublemaker is standing right in front of us." My blood boiled. I wanted to shout, to tear down her lies. But then I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't expected. One neighbor, an older man, sitting in the back row, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. He gave me the slightest nod. It was small, almost invisible, but it was hope. Not everyone believed her. Not everyone was blind. The meeting dragged on for hours, ending with a vote on whether to issue me final warnings. The result was close. Too close. Karen didn't win outright, but she didn't lose either. Instead, I was left hanging, in a limbo where the next misstep could cost me everything. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the violation letters spread out on the table. And for the first time, I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. What if she really could ruin me? What if the HOA board turned fully against me? What if I lost my home? But then, I remembered the officer's nod, the old man's nod, and I realized something. Karen's power was real, but it wasn't absolute. Her kingdom had cracks, and if I could widen them, maybe the whole thing would collapse. I doubled down. More cameras, more documentation, more records. Every letter she sent, every petty violation, every smirk she gave me from across Taya's Street. I saved it all. And then, something unexpected happened. Late one night, there was a knock at my door. I hesitated, expecting another threat, another warning. But when I opened it, I found the same older man from the meeting. He looked over his shoulder nervously, then whispered, "You're not alone. Some of us are tired of her too. But we're scared. She punishes anyone who speaks up. She's ruined people before. Jobs, reputations, marriages. But maybe, with proof, with enough of us, we can stop her." My heart pounded. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. There were others, trapped under her control, afraid to move. And suddenly, this wasn't just about my ATV. It was about the whole neighborhood. The man slipped me a small envelope before walking away. Inside were copies of old violation letters, stories of others Karen had targeted, patterns of intimidation stretching back years. It was the missing puzzle piece. Karen's reign wasn't new. It was just finally being challenged. I leaned back in my chair, holding the papers, my mind racing. I had allies now. Quiet, hidden, but real. The question was, could I pull them together? Could we finally topple the queen of the HOA? And that's when it hit me. If Karen was willing to weaponize her board against me, to ruin her neighbors for power, to even sacrifice her daughter's freedom to protect her image, then how far was she willing to go to keep her throne? Karen thought she had me cornered. She thought the HOA board was her weapon, her shield, her crown. But what she didn't realize was that the cracks in her kingdom were growing, and the whispers of rebellion were louder than her gavel. After that night with the old man, I started noticing subtle signs. A neighbor leaving me a quick smile instead of looking away. Another slipping a note under my door. "You're right. Stay strong." People who once feared her were beginning to stir. Like the spell she cast was breaking. I gathered everything. The photos, the violation letters, the testimonies from neighbors she had targeted for years. It was a mountain of evidence, not just against her daughter, but against Karen herself. Still, I knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. She was too good at twisting stories, too good at making the victim look like the villain. If I wanted to end this, it had to be public, undeniable, in the open where everyone could see. The perfect chance came at the next HOA meeting. Karen walked in like a queen as always, her smile polished, her voice dripping fake sweetness as she greeted her loyal subjects. She didn't know I had been preparing for this night. The room was packed, more neighbors than I had ever seen before, some standing in the back, some even spilling into the hallway. People wanted answers. They wanted to see the fight play out. Karen called the meeting to order, and then she turned her gaze to me. As you all know, this member continues to bring division to our peaceful community. Tonight, the board will vote on fines and possible removal from our association. Her words hit the crowd like a hammer, but before she could slam down her gavel, I stood up. "Before you vote," I said, my voice steady but loud enough to echo through the room, "there are things this community deserves to know." Karen's smile faltered, just a little. "You are out of order," she snapped, but I kept going. I held up the thick folder of papers. "These are not my words. These are your neighbors' words. Stories of fines, threats, intimidation, stretching back years. And all of them signed by the same hand. Karen's." The room buzzed, people shifting, leaning forward, listening. I placed copies on the table for the board, and then I did something Karen didn't expect. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the projector, and played the footage. Her daughter on my ATV, speeding down the street, laughing, screaming that she was untouchable, and then the arrest, the handcuffs, the police car pulling away. The room erupted in gasps, whispers, shocked voices overlapping like a storm. Karen's face went pale. She slammed the gavel, shouting over the noise. "This is manipulation, lies, all of it taken out of context." But the neighbors weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at each other, nodding, whispering truths they had buried for too long. The old man in the back stood up, his voice trembling but loud. "She fined me $3,000 for planting the wrong flowers, and when I fought back, she threatened to sue me." A woman stood next, tears in her eyes. "She destroyed my marriage, told people lies about my husband until we had to move. She ruined us." One by one, the voices rose, a chorus of pain, anger, years of secrets spilling out into the light. Karen tried to shout them down, but the power was slipping from her hands. Her smile was gone, her mask cracking, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. The board members looked uneasy. One even removed his HOA badge and set it on the table. And then, the officer who had arrested her daughter walked into the room. The silence was instant. Every head turned. He walked straight to the front, handed the board a folder, and said, "We have opened and investigated. Iron into harassment and misuse of HOA authority. Multiple complaints have been filed, and we are moving forward with charges." Karen's face turned red, then white. She tried to speak, but no words came out. The gavel slipped from her hand, clattering against the table like the sound of her empire collapsing. The meeting ended in chaos, voices everywhere, people cheering, some crying, and me standing there, watching as Karen was escorted out by officers, her head down, her reign finally over. That night, the neighborhood felt lighter. Blinds opened. Neighbors smiled. Some even walked over to shake my hand. For the first time, the cul-de-sac looked like what it always pretended to be. Peaceful. Safe. Free. I sat on my porch as the sun set. The ATV parked safely in my driveway again. And I thought about everything that had happened. How one stolen ride had exposed years of corruption. How one act of arrogance had brought down a queen. But as I stared into the quiet street, I couldn't help but wonder. Power like Karen's doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers. It waits. It finds new ways to crawl back. And that's the thought that kept me awake long after the streetlights came on. Was this really the end of Karen's rule? Or had we just cut off one head of a snake that had many more waiting to strike?